The opening scene of an episode of TV is what draws you in, sets the tone, mood and pace for the next hour whilst also establishing the environment, the characters' emotions, motives, and it provides a backdrop for what we as the audience are about to go on and see. Over the course of Season 2, there have been 4 out of the 5 episodes where The Last of Us has managed to show us that they've mastered that feeling that it wants to give us by providing us pure works of art in the opening few minutes. This was within Episode 2, Episode 3, Episode 4, and most recently, Episode 5. I think opening scenes can be underrated, and we saw signs of The Last of Us putting an importance on them in Season 1 of the show, with a couple of the episodes holding weight too. But with it being near on every episode this time round, I wanted to share how The Last of Us have managed to perfect it. So let's get into it. Here is how The Last of Us mastered the opening scene. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. Episode 2. The opening scene of Season 2 Episode 2 is arguably one of the most important opening scenes that we've had in the show since Episode 2 of the first season of The Last of Us, where we saw the Cordyceps outbreak originating in Jakarta. The opening scene in this episode showed us Abby, who was later going to be killing the person that we loved most in the show and would become the target for Ellie over the course of the season. The dreamscape nightmare that the show decided to put us in with Abby, looking directly at herself but not recognizing the person in front of her, whilst also warning herself to not go in and look at the body of her father. A piece of information that we didn't know at the time because when Abby said, "Who?" there was no answer. We only found this out when she was face to face with Joel towards the end, something which made that moment hit even harder. During this scene, we were just maybe led to believe that it was a firefly that she cared about, not the person that raised her. The dark lighting with the pink hue, the sound of the alarm constantly going off, and the tease of information that Abby witnessed something on that day that she wished she could erase from her memory. It was a haunting opening scene that allowed there to be a payoff later on down the line when we saw the climax occurring between herself and Joel, and why it was that she so desperately wanted Joel to be killed in such a horrific, torturous way. That's one thing that this show does really well with its opening scenes. It plants a tiny piece of information, and it almost gets watered throughout the show with other events that occur in the episode until the payoff happens. It happened here when Abby revealed that it was her father that Joel killed. It happened with Elise when describing the airborne Cordyceps on basement level 2, and it happened with Isaac Dixon when we saw him kill Fedra in the back of a van and commit to Wolf. I also loved the fact that this episode had the first 2 lines of dialogue in the opening scene be, "He's dead," which was then followed by her responding to herself by saying, "Who?" It added ambiguity, and it just allowed us to see the true reason as to why Abby had this burning desire within her to kill Joel, and the wish to go back and change history, because he's dead really did matter. Episode 3. Episode 3's opening scene differed from the others because this wasn't one which teased events that would later be occurring towards the end of the episode. Instead, this was one that allowed us to look back slightly and just be in the moment. This was very much focused on Tommy and Joel and the somber state that Tommy was in with the grief that he was feeling over his brother being killed in a horrific way. The yellow hue that was lighting the room due to the fires that were outside burning the infected that plagued Jackson only hours earlier also added an eerie backdrop too. Within this scene, for the most part of it, we were up close and personal with Tommy as we were seeing and also absorbing the pain that he was feeling. We even got a focus on Joel's broken watch that Sarah gave him, which gave us one final look at the care that Joel had within him, and the very thing that showed us just how much she meant to him, carrying it with him all of those years later. But then, once we saw Tommy's reaction to Joel, the camera moved back gradually and we saw the sheer amount of dead that were in the morgue due to the attack that the infected did on Jackson. The attack that was triggered by Abby. Showing that not only was Abby responsible for the death of Joel, but she was also responsible for the death of many in Jackson. It was a really dark opening scene, and rather than drip feed us information, it just allowed us to be present in the moment with the dead, and most importantly, Joel. The overarching feeling of grief was established in this opening scene, and that ran all the way through this episode. And I'd say with it also cutting to Ellie in the hospital bed waking up for the first time since Joel was murdered, seeing her scream with a tear going down her cheek, it was just such a sinister and upsetting mood that was established. Episode 4. The fourth episode in the season was one that didn't necessarily share information for later on down the line, but instead it introduced us to a character that we saw meeting with Wolf and ultimately turning his back on Fedra. This worked well because in the opening scene we saw Isaac's distaste towards Fedra despite working for them due to the way that they treated civilians. And even though we saw that he was prepared to kill all but one of them in the van, him saving one person mattered a lot, and it was telling of the character. The person that he saved was new to Fedra and didn't share the beliefs that everybody else in that van did, so he didn't want to persecute somebody and sentence them to death when they hadn't done anything wrong, yet. So it showed a sense of morality within Isaac and that he wasn't just violent and murderous for the sake of it. This was important because if it wasn't done, then there'd be no boundaries with Isaac, and we'd have just seen him as a monster when torturing the Seraphite later on down the line with no humanity. But because we saw him save somebody, we knew that he had reasons for what he was doing. This opening scene wasn't one that was necessarily haunting, but it allowed us to see how Isaac got into the situation that he was in with working with Wolf, and it established his moral boundaries, so it worked really well. Episode 5. In episode 5, this was an opening scene that put all of its focus on planting the seed for what we were going to be seeing during the climax of the episode, and it showed the lens that people get pushed to due to the Cordyceps outbreak. For example, seeing Elise in tears over the fact that she had to seal off a basement level where many of her team were sent to investigate the infected was shocking enough. But when right at the end of the episode, when we heard that she actually sentenced her own son to death by doing that, when Hanrahan said, "I'm sorry about your son," it was a painful, gut-hitting moment that I didn't expect, and it showed that the Cordyceps outbreak pushes people to do things that they never imagined that they'd need to do, even to the people that they love most. Pair that with the fact that she mentioned that the basement level was a place where Cordyceps was in the air and how it had the potential to be catastrophic if it were to get out of the contained area. Then, in seeing Ellie and Nora there during the end of the episode and witnessing Cordyceps essentially using Leon, her son, and the rest of the team as these vessels to just pump out spores, barely keeping them alive, it painted a fate that was far different to anything that we've seen before with Cordyceps. This was the most clear-cut example of why these opening scenes are important, because something was hinted at for us. We were left to think about it and wonder what it was like. And then we saw it in all of its glory when the episode wanted to reach a climax. So having the thought of the basement level in our mind for about 35 minutes before actually seeing it allowed the reveal of it to be even more damning and haunting. The opening scenes in The Last of Us are things that I always look forward to watching because most of the time they hold such weight and importance. They operate in their own right as being powerful, but when they get connected to the rest of the episode, they're these complementary added extras that add so much to the story. I'd probably say my favorite opening scene was the one with Tommy when he was looking at Joel's body. It was emotional, it was in the moment, and it just showed the sheer weight of Abby's actions. So, there you have it, how The Last of Us mastered the opening scene. If you want to see every episode in The Last of Us Season 2 being broken down, then check the playlist below, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future videos. What's been your favourite opening scene? Share your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning into the video and I'll see you in the next one.